This probably came from a speech therapist. Maybe one of the people who I know is here. So what are some of the practical tips for working with 4-year-old children who stutter? I'll try to keep this one short. When we're working with young children in the preschool years, there are a couple good strategies. I talked about a few of them in an earlier segment. I think the first strategy is to understand the whole child, to look at the child's temperament, to look at the child's speech and language skills above and beyond the fluency. What are their language skills? Are they having trouble with language? Do they have trouble understanding language? Maybe they understand language very well, but they have trouble expressing themselves. We want to understand about their language. Let's assume their language is all just fine, but they stutter. The next domain I want to think about is looking at their temperament, their psychological toughness, tenderness. Some kids are really rough and tough, rock'em sock'em. They just keep ticking no matter what happens. And that's an interesting temperament, and that's really helpful to know and very different than others who are really delicate. There are some people who are really sensitive. They're sensitive themselves. They also tend to be very sensitive to others. So it can be a very positive attribute, and it doesn't need to be changed. But how I would work with a 4-year-old with this temperament would be different than how I'd work with a 4-year-old with this temperament. And I think that's pretty obvious. Generally, with a 4-year-old, we will not work with anyone under the age of 8 unless parents are heavily involved. So we're always working in teamwork with the parents. Our goal, whatever approach we're going to be employing, is that we don't throw any approach or anything too rigid on anybody, but we try to, again, tailor fit the right therapy, borrowing from the best research out there in all the popular approaches that you can look up, and more importantly, leaning on experience and clinical decision-making to determine what's the right ratio of these different techniques, all of which seem to have a good evidence base, but none of them are a cure-all for every child. So it's a real decision-making process, engaging the parents, putting the parents in the driver's seat, and making sure that we're working with the child not only to help them move through the disfluency and hopefully find easier ways to get their words out over time, but also making sure that we're cognizant of the communicative spirit and the communication values of the child. If a child is crying coming into a session, that should be a telltale sign to do something to make it more fun. If a child cries 2 times, that's a conversation with the therapist. If a child is crying 3 times going into the therapy session, I think it's fair to say something isn't the right fit. So I think we need to keep kids happy. We need to treat them like people. We need to make sure that the communication that we encourage between parents and children is naturalistic, not artificial and plastic. And in doing so, hopefully we can help them with the physical side of stuttering and also help them with the communication values to keep talking and have the confidence they were born with.